Good evening, friends. Welcome to Civil's Manthan classes. In today's editorial Manthan, that is the analysis of editorials of today's 12th May, we shall discuss a few articles. Let's start the discussion. The first article is regarding equal freedom and forced labor. So there are two articles in today's Hindi newspaper, that is this one, equal freedom and forced labor, another one, legal but not appropriate. Both are regarding the same topic and different perspectives have been given. Well, what is the background of these two articles? Recently, a few states like UP, MP, Rajasthan, these states have basically come forward in bringing relaxation in the labor laws, like increase in the working hours from 8 hours to 12 hours. And UP has even summarily suspended its labor laws for the next 3 years. So what's the reason given behind by the states? That they want to give a boost to the economic activities in this lockdown. So most of the economic activities have been facing a lot of trouble. So this is basically to support them, so that, as we have discussed before, that labor laws, archaic labor laws in India, they have scuttled the economic growth. They have scuttled the small industries to grow big, because we have plethora of labor laws, like on an average around 250 in total labor laws are there. And in these archaic labor laws, there are huge complexity. And if we see in Factories Act, in Industrial Disputes Act, so different parameters are given, say 10 and 20 workers in Factories Act for two different conditions. For Industrial Disputes Act, if more than 100 employees are there, then it has to comply to the Industrial Disputes Act, Equal Wages Act, Minimum Wages Act. So there are various huge number of Shops and Establishment Act, which all these acts, all these labor laws basically monitor different things. So what actually happens, the small companies, the MSMEs for example, so they can't afford to comply to so many huge number of laws. So what they do, they tend to intentionally keep themselves small. And when they keep themselves small, they are not able to take benefit of economies of scale. And it not only keeps them small, but it also limits the economic growth of the whole country basically. So in this COVID-19 situation, lockdown is there. So to give a boost to the industrial activity, certain states that I gave example, they brought reforms in the labor laws, or you can say suspended the labor laws, or they have given more powers to the industries to lay off, retrenchment, like these, increase the number of working hours as well. So this article talks about equal freedom and forced labor. So it has linked that all these initiatives or all these steps taken by the government are interlinked to the forced labor basically. So this article starts with how B.R. Ambedkar Saab, while he was the chairman of the drafting committee while drafting our Indian Constitution, so he has given special impetus to fundamental rights, and for the fundamental rights to, you can say, if fundamental rights are to sustain, there has to be limit on the state power, because state could use its power arbitrarily to curtail the fundamental rights. So he also said that it is not only there is also opinion that it is not only the state power, but there is also a potential for the private parties, like individuals, corporations, who have huge economic, political, social influence, and they could curtail the, or you can say violate the fundamental rights of certain person, like laborers. Then what? Because fundamental rights more or so protect the people, protect the citizens of India against the violation of fundamental rights by the state. But they, in more say broad sense, they don't protect against the private individuals in broad sense, we can say. But in certain one, yes, they protect against the private individuals as well. For example, untouchability, or certain articles are there. Now here what we can say, it gives a brief background how the labor rights that have evolved in India during the British time. In 1931 Karachi Declaration, so Bill of Rights was there. So that discussed about the evolution of labor laws. And in our Indian Constitution, we have a fundamental right, Article 23, that prohibits the forced labor or begar, you can say. Then there are some articles in DPSP as well, Directive Principles of State Policy, that also caters to the laborers, the workers in industries and factories, their participation in management, the health of the workers as well. There are certain articles. Now, the author further says, the writer further says that Gautam Bhatia, that this forced labor can't be just say physical force. It can't be limited to physical force. In narrow sense, it is physical force, but it can't be limited to that. For example, if someone points a gun to your head and asks you to do something, then you do something out of in a force. So, but it can't be limited to that only, right? What if there are no other options? Basically, there are no suitable options out of economic necessity as well. Then also it is a kind of the forced labor. If someone has to do something, certain work out of economic compulsion or no other meaningful choice, then also it is a forced labor, as per the writer. And in the judiciary has also taken a stand in the same way. In PUDR case, you can remember this case, PUDR case. Basically, at the time Asian Games was there. So Asian Games village, there were exploitation was seen out of migrant laborers, contract laborers. So a case was filed in the Supreme Court. That is a PUDR case. And in that case, Supreme Court has taken a broad view of the forced labor. It has said the compulsion of economic circumstances which leaves no choice of alternatives to a person in want and compels him to provide labor or service. It is also equivalent to the forced labor. So you can just remember this case, PUDR case. Now, so this article is basically trying to link this to the same situation as how states are moving forward with suspension of the labor laws or providing more power to the factories and industries to do away with the labor laws or to hire and fire at will, increase the number of working hours. So it has linked in the same way as for the forced labor in a way. So this is the opinion of this article. Next one is it is regarding legal but not appropriate. So they have also discussed about how the various states they have come forward with bringing reforms in the labor or suspension of the certain labor laws. It is legal but not appropriate. Some states have done by way of say ordinance. Okay, ordinance is fine, like UP, MP, certain states, their assemblies are not in session. Okay, fine, they have done so. Secondly, but the question is whether such questions of big importance are to be decided by ordinance only, right? Because it lacks the consultation. It lacks the consultation of the parliament. In a democracy, the executive should basically have an oversight by the legislature, right? Then another thing is in Factories Act, for instance. In Factories Act, there is a provision that state governments can exempt the Factories Act, can exempt the industries and factories from the Factories Act once there is public emergency, right? Now, one has to interpret whether the present situation is a public emergency. Now, state governments have considered so and put in given the exemption from the Factories Act by subscribing to this public emergency clause of Factories Act. So this article basically discussed that the steps have been legal but not appropriate. they have not been appropriate as per se. They have taken by ordinance or by way of taking certain clauses, which doesn't seems to be in a way, because another thing is, you can say, uh, the legitimacy of any state action that depends upon the democracy. Democracy basically is being decided when the parliament or the legislature that oversights over the elected representatives, that is the executives. So that has been missing in this particular case. So that's all about these two articles. While writing the answers for mains, we should remember that there has to be a balanced answer. On one side, you can take certain points out of these two articles. Secondly, we should also write in the positives as well. What have been the compulsions, right? Because labor reforms, these have been long demanded reforms that had been there. But yes, you can say methods could have been more appropriate, more consultation could be there, public consultation would be, but reforms have been long pending, you can say, and will help definitely. The need of the hour is to boost economic activities also for the nation. Second article we have is written by Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, our Vice President, Chairman of Rajya Sabha, the need for a second chamber. So he's talking about what is the need for the second chamber. Second chamber is what? Here, Rajya Sabha. So we have a bicameral legislature system in our country. So bicameral means what? Bicameral means there are two houses. Our parliament has two houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So we have a system of two houses in our legislature. So in parliament, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. In the state governments, in certain state governments, we have Vidhan Sabha as well as the Vidhan Parishad, that is state legislative assembly as well as state legislative councils. But here we're talking about Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Why we are discussing this? Venkaiah Naidu ji has written about that May 13. It was the day in 19. It was the day when the first session was held of Rajya Sabha. He has written about the positives and negatives, how the Rajya Sabha has evolved, the second chamber house has evolved, and what is the need of the second house, and what have been the various issues that have been concerning the parliamentary bicameral nature of the parliamentary system. The first thing is, it came into vogue by Government of India Act 1919. So it was made bicameral with Council of States. So at that time, it was not known by the Rajya Sabha, but by Council of States. Yes, definitely, it is the same way as a second house, we can say. But even at the time, the voting rights that were limited to only the wealthy people, landowners. And even the women could not vote, or neither they could seek the membership. So women, they also didn't have any right to vote. Then we come with the Government of India Act 1935 that brought certain more reforms under the, but they could not be brought into the reality, because we know 1935 Government of India Act didn't come into effect, these certain provisions. Then in once the Constituent Assembly was constituted, Constitution was drafted, and the Constituent Assembly acted as the Parliament, as the lawmaking body till 1952, and then our bicameral nature of the Parliament came into being along with the Rajya Sabha. It found its origin, you can say, US Congress. We have the United States has a US Congress, same way as we have the Parliament. It has Senate as the upper house. One is House of Representatives, that is the lower house. Senate is the upper house, just how we have the Rajya Sabha. Now it says that US Constitution derived its influence from Montesquieu, the French philosopher, who had said about that legislative body being composed of two parts, they check one another by the mutual privilege of rejecting. So they help in keeping a balance in a way. Now, there are certain Constituent Assembly debates where certain members of the Constituent Assembly, they favor the second house. Certain members of Assembly, they rejected or they opposed the bringing of Rajya Sabha. One of the member, Muhammad Tahir, he asserted that upper house was not essential because it is a resemblance of imperialism. They brought it, right? Then another member, Professor Shebin Lal Saxena, he said that this second chamber of house would prove to be clog in the wheel of progress of nation, clog in the wheel of the development of the nation, and it will, at the present time, we need the laws to be made quickly, but the second chamber would obstruct the fast enacting of laws. And we are seeing in present days as well, the efficiency of the parliament, it has declined because of more and more obstructionist tendencies in the second house. Laws are not being passed. In the past, we have seen in the last couple of years, these have been the tendencies. Then Loknath Mishra ji, he opposed the parity of powers in lawmaking for the upper houses. So these were the certain, you can say, people who were opposing the second house, who are opposing the Rajya Sabha. Then the proponents of second chamber, one of the member said, Najiruddin Ahmed ji said that it would introduce an element of sobriety and second thought, that it would bring in a second thought to the lawmaking. Suppose, for example, Lok Sabha brings certain bill in the parliament, right? And if Lok Sabha is having the majority of the executives only, the ruling party only, right? So when ruling party has the majority in the Lok Sabha, so it is being passed even without much of the debate and discussions, and that is to be passed because of the majority of the ruling party. When it comes to the Rajya Sabha, there are more chances of giving a second thought to the bill or bringing more amendments to the bill that would make it more progressive. Secondly, Shri Iyengar said, Ananta Swami Iyengar said, the genius of people to have full play besides checking hasty legislation. So, second house, that Rajya Sabha, it checks hasty legislation as well. Then N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, he made a strong case for Rajya Sabha, for the second chamber. He said that the second chamber is to hold dignified debates on the important issues and to delay legislations which might be outcome of passions of the moment until the passions have subsided and calm considerations could be best sought. So because sometimes certain actions are taken by the executives out of passion, out of their political mileage, out of the vote bank politics. But when the passion subsides, then the wisdom prevails, right? So so that time is being given by the Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha could delay certain kind of the hasty decisions that are made by the Lok Sabha and could help in making a better decision making. Then Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, our first chairman of Rajya Sabha in 1950, he said that Parliament is not only a legislative body but also a deliberative one, which enables the members to debate major issues of public importance. So he talks that Rajya Sabha helps in making the debate meaningful, right? So you can remember this because this can be used directly in the examination. You can use this statement of Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan ji in terms of conclusion as well. So certain statements from Rajya Sabha, because it is an important question that can be asked regarding the importance or the role of Rajya Sabha. So you can remember certain statements of great leaders of past. Then coming to further, that it also provides domain knowledge as well. We know there are 12 members are nominated by the president. So 12 members are nominated to the Rajya Sabha by the president in the fields of art, literature, science, and social service. So these are 4 areas where president nominates. So these people, they have the domain expertise, right? So they are the specialized. So it brings in the expertise in the lawmaking. So these 3 points, it summarizes the importance of Rajya Sabha. The first one is to revise or delay legislation without proving a clog in the wheel of progress. Right? So it helps in delaying the legislation, but without being a clog, without delaying the development process. Secondly, it also represents the interest of states. So it helps in strengthening federalism. What is federalism? I believe you understand. Thirdly, it also helps in making a deliberation process more meaningful. So it acts as a deliberative body, and high quality debates could happen on the important issues in the second house. So these are few points that you can take away from this. A very good article. Now, second part of this article would be discussed tomorrow. Venkaiah Naidu ji will write it tomorrow. We'll discuss it later on. And he will discuss about whether, we'll discuss in the present time whether it is acting as a clog in the wheel of the development process or not, or how the present performance of second house is. Right, now we can just summarize the whole article. So what you can say, we have discussed about how it has evolved, right? Secondly, we have discussed about the positives. Certain members of the Constituent Assembly have given in positives, like in the proponents and the opponents. So in a way, you just need to remember from the mains point of view that what are the positives or the pros for the Rajya Sabha, or what is the criticism of Rajya Sabha. The first importance of Rajya Sabha, it acts as a checks and balance, right? Because majority faction is the ruling party in the Lok Sabha, so it helps in checks and balance. It strengthens the federalism as well, because states have a say, right? Because how the members of Rajya Sabha comes, the state legislative assembly, it elects the members of Rajya Sabha. So states, they have the representation in Rajya Sabha, but we don't have the equal representation from each state as the US has. In US, there are 50 states, and each state has 2 members in its upper house, that is the Senate. Right, so there are 100 members, you can say, in the Senate. But here in India, the states, they don't have the equal representation. But yeah, they have the representation, so it somehow strengthens federalism. Bicameralism, yes, it brings in the different interest, diverse interest. So more representation of diversity is there. Then it also brings in the deliberation and less political compulsion. It also shapes public opinion, because these debates are widely covered by media, so people, they form their opinion by listening to, reading to the debates. Then one of this point is that it also provides permanent character to the parliament. So it provides a stability and continuity, because Lok Sabha, it is only for 5 years, right? It changes after every 5 years. It is again reconstituted, but Rajya Sabha provides stability and continuity. Then it also provides space for experts, as we have discussed. 12 members are nominated by the president in Rajya Sabha from the fields of art, literature, science, and social service. So domain expertise is being provided. Lateral talent, you can say. Now, criticism of Rajya Sabha, we have seen that it impedes the development process because of obstructionist tendencies of the opposition party, of the various parties. They could obstruct the even well-intended bills, and it could impede the growth prospects of our country. Secondly, even the Rajya Sabha has seen that people who are getting elected to Rajya Sabha, they are the party sympathizers, the party fundraisers, or the losers in the election in Lok Sabha, or even that they found place in the chronic capitalists, journalists, retired CEOs, civil servants. So it is not the representation of states, basically, who are coming. Anybody who are having from the, say, party sympathizers, or people who have lost election in Lok Sabha. So it is acting as a second chamber for them, not for the states, basically. Then even the political parties, they're not rising above the party level politics. They are only pursuing their political agenda, rather than having a healthy debate over the topics. Then inequality in the representation of states. We have discussed that the states they don't have the equal representation as the United States has, where 2 seats are there for each and every state. Then another point is that there are also they're acting as seats for generating funds. Corrupt and criminal politicians who are rejected by voters, they find their way into the Rajya Sabha. Then this point is also important, that we have seen the large absentees of the members. So they're not playing any role in the deliberation. Then financial burden as well. It also pays cost a huge cost to the exchequer. So these are certain criticism of Rajya Sabha. Certain reform is suggested by Panchi Commission, that there should be equal representation of all states as happens in United States of America. Other things are that the members should they rise above the party politics and should in fact represent the state interest in the respective states' interest in the parliament. So that's all from today's editorial discussion. Today, another article of this second chamber or this Venkaiah Naiduji's Rajya Sabha article will come. We'll discuss that tomorrow. That's all for today. Thank you. Thank you very much.